This is the beautiful LK Chen Golden Willow Liuyedao, and it was very kindly provided to me just briefly for a review. And it's gorgeous. This is a really lovely sword. I'm tempted to buy a copy for my very own. This is a late period Qing example, probably from the 18th century. But where did this style of sword come from? So in order to figure out Chinese saber history, we have to roll the clock all the way back to about the 11th century or so. So prior to the Mongol conquest, Chinese sabers were mostly straight. They were straight along the back, and that's referred to as jibadao, so basically straight back saber. And they could have either a kind of straight belly, kind of like a palash, that just ended in a kind of upward curved tip, or some of them were more rounded on the bottom, more like a falchion. And during the Song Dynasty, you had all sorts of cleavers and choppers and unusual things, with just the beginnings of sabers starting to be influenced by the Khitan Liao dynasty. Then the Mongols came in, and when the Mongol dynasty came in, the Yuan dynasty, they brought the cavalry saber from the steppe peoples. So you had sabers that looked kind of like this. They tended to be long, they tended to be narrow, although they're rather thick in cross-section, and they don't have a lot of distal taper. They come in a few different sizes, so some are closer to 70 centimeters in length, but others could get over 90, 100, maybe even 110 centimeters in blade length, so they could be very, very long. They had this very notable element here called a tunko, or collar, blade collar right here at the throat, and they usually had very simple guards, just a kind of simple cross on them. And also notable is this, the direction of the grip, which tends to curve downward, which is something that's very common on cavalry sabers across many different cultures, this sort of pistol grip that helps to keep the grip from sliding, and it also can help bring the point of the sword back in line if you're trying to deliver a thrust from horseback. It's a little bit harder if the sword is straight out and the curve starts pulling up and away, and you're trying to bring the point down to be able to give a stab when you're galloping up on a horse. So the Yuan dynasty lasts for a little bit more than 100 years, and then finally the Han Chinese wrest control of China back from the Mongols, and you have the beginnings of the Ming. So during the Ming, the Dao, the single-edged swords, kind of fall into two different types of design. One of them looks a little bit like these steppe sabers and has a kind of curved design and a curved end here, and we refer to those as nowadays as the willow leaf, so the Luiyedao. We also have ones that tend to be a little bit more straight with just a little bit of a curve at the end, and those are referred to as goose sabers, either Yan Maodao or Yan Lingdao. And at this point, anyone who's more interested, I'm going to recommend they go visit the Mandarin Mansion and read a wonderful article by Philip Tom, who's got an article that's going to share the same title of Geese and Willows, I believe it's called. And he talks about how to distinguish between these two, because it can be kind of subtle. How do you know where the line is? And back in the day, they probably didn't make a big distinction. Some would be more curved, some would be less curved, some would have almost no curve. So today, blade collectors will distinguish between the two. Where do you draw the line? So Philip Tom, Peter Decker, some of these very well-respected collectors have decided that a good way to decide is if you're looking down the length of the blade, and kind of like the first half or so is essentially straight, that is a Yan Lingdao. And if the curvature basically starts at the beginning of the blade and just continues throughout the whole length of the blade, that is a good candidate for a Luiyedao. We don't have period sources that say that. This is a modern designation. So keep that in mind. So on these Yan Lingdao, it's very common that you have a straight blade and then a straight grip. This was the most common of the two designs, especially during the Ming, but it also persisted into the Qing. So alongside that, we have the beautiful willow saber. And so the willow sabers were used during the Ming as well. We see them in Ming artwork. And after the Manchu conquest, they seem to become more and more popular. And in the 18th century, where this particular example comes from, they basically eclipsed the Yuan in popularity. So at that point, this one finally becomes the single most popular saber of all the saber types, and we see a lot of them, especially towards the end of the Qing. And if I pull it out, you'll see that this does in fact bear a lot of similarities to the earlier Mongol saber. We have a nice, gently curving blade. We have the big prominent tonko. You can find them on Yanmodao also, but definitely on Yanlingdao. And you have, once again, the curved grip here at the end. And this example made by LK Chen is based on an original, a very high-end produced original from Peter Decker's collection. I say based on, it's not exactly one-to-one. There have been some small concessions. The blade is very slightly thinner based on the measurements I have on this example. This one comes in about 1 millimeter thinner all the way along than the original antique. All of the hilt furniture is really, really very closely done. I suspect it might be slightly thicker than the original ones that were hand chiseled, but the details they've gotten are all correct. They have actual red ray skin that's been dyed and put under this incredibly faithful wrap that's been put on, making an incredibly comfortable handle here. And once again, we have the brass collar, which you'll note no longer can you easily fit your finger on in the way that you could for the step sabers. This particular example that I'm holding is of laminate construction, so of 3 steel construction. It has a harder piece of steel in the middle to have a sharp, keen cutting edge, then has softer steels on the side to give it some reinforcement to allow it to maintain its shock. And it has, again, 2 beautiful fullers that are very well executed along its length, and this beautiful little mini fuller that we see here. These seem to be borrowed from Indo-Persian and Mamluk designs, this particular fullering consideration. It does have a false edge, and the false edge is fine, but it is not sharp, so you won't hurt yourself on the back edge of it. So this particular example, along with the real ray skin that's been sanded down and lacquered on the scabbard, is just beautiful. It's a really high-end example. It's very faithful to the original antique, and is probably the nicest one that's on the market, certainly from a production level of willow leaf saber. Can it cut? Just absolutely beautiful performance. So this feels like a dream in the hand. It's helped in part because of that thinning out in the blade. This balances at around 10 centimeters from the discard, and that's a very convenient position for it to handle. I'm going to link to a video that the Scholar General and I did studying original antique Dao, and on many original Dao we have points of balance that are actually quite far out in the blade. The original Liuyedao that is in the Mandarin Mansion had a point of balance that was more than 17 centimeters out from the blade. So even though these are reasonably short weapons, they can sometimes have a lot of blade presence on them. Does that mean I think that this one is not historical? No, it's still within historical norms, and it's very comfortable. He's chosen a very handy sort of example to base his design on. But just keep in mind that this sort of blade could have even more power in the cut, and perhaps be even less maneuverable depending on if you wanted it for infantry use or for horseback, or depending on what type of target you were going to chop against. But if you were going to pick this one up, this particular one, you're going to find a very comfortable weapon that's very easy to manipulate and be something that you'd be happy to carry on your side, has a razor cutting edge, and it's just going to be a lot of fun and a wonderful part of Qing history. So, hope you enjoy, and we'll be back on the channel for more discussion next time. Take care.